Hey everybody, welcome back to Nick's Saxophone World for yet another video. This one goes out to all the music teachers out there. Whether you're in a public school setting directing a large group of students or you teach privately, and really it's geared toward anybody that's teaching beginner students. If you've ever had the experience of teaching somebody from day one on the saxophone, you know that it's kind of a tough thing. There's a lot of things to think about. So, especially if you're somebody that finds themselves in this situation, but you're not primarily a saxophone player, this video is going to be really important for you. I'm going to show you 3 things that will drastically improve your students' results right from the beginning. And I think that these are 3 of the most common things that young students get wrong, and then they develop bad habits, and they're trying to overcome those bad habits, and it just goes down a bad road and can actually turn them off from playing the instrument, which obviously none of us want. Now, I was thinking about this week because I just came from a camp where for 4 days I was teaching some students that have less than a year of experience playing the saxophone. And the first day, when I get them as just saxophones in a small group, I spend the day really talking about these 3 things and checking their instruments and checking how they play. And I've found that it's given me good results over the years, so I wanted to relay that information to you. Okay, so tip number 1, and this is maybe the most important thing, is their position on the mouthpiece. And what I mean by that is how much or how little of the mouthpiece they actually have in their embouchure. This can make a huge difference. So there's a couple of things that you can listen for with your saxophone players that will help you to diagnose where they are on the mouthpiece and where you should move the mouthpiece. So the very first thing you're going to listen for is a sound like a goose or a duck flying in. Now, any of you that have been teaching music for any period of time are very familiar with this sound. It sounds like this. Now, obviously, this is one of our least favorite sounds, and there's a very simple fix for it. 9 times out of 10, when you're getting this honking, goose, duck-like sound, the student is too far in on the mouthpiece, meaning that they have too much of that mouthpiece and reed in their chops. And what this does is it prevents them from being able to control the reed, so the reed just goes crazy and they have zero control over the sound, and it results in too much of the reed vibrating and they get this horrible sound. So if you hear that sound, the first thing I want you to think about is having them take the mouthpiece a little bit out of their mouth, okay? And that should fix a lot of the problem, make their lives a lot easier. It should bring their pitch in center a little bit more, and just generally help everything and give you less of a headache in general when you're a music teacher. So if you hear the honking, if you hear the goose, you hear the duck, tell them to take the mouthpiece out of their mouth slightly. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, if you hear somebody trying to put air through the instrument and it feels like they can't get any through the instrument and they can't get that reed to vibrate and their sound is very, very soft and all you're really hearing is reed noise and not good tone, it's the complete opposite. They probably have too little mouthpiece in their mouth. Now, this is not going to allow the reed to vibrate at all, and actually what their lip is going to do is it's going to close off the tip of the mouthpiece, really not allowing any air or allowing very, very little air to actually make it through the instrument. So there's the opposite end of the spectrum. Generally, what I try to tell my students is you should be halfway up the bill of the mouthpiece, and that is generally a really good starting point for them. Now, what you want to try to do is you want to try to stress this position on the mouthpiece as early as you possibly can, because the problem is we get comfortable with where our mouthpiece sits in our embouchure. Like me, when I put the saxophone in my mouth, I don't even think about where it's going to go. It goes there by feel, after, 15, 20 years of playing the saxophone, I don't think about it anymore. Now, that can be a problem with young students because if they get used to the feel of the mouthpiece all the way in or too far out, it is going to be 10 times harder to break that habit than it is to get them to do it right, out of the gate. So really, really try to stress this from like day one when you get a new saxophone student. Okay, so that takes care of the first thing and the most common thing that I hear. I heard it all week last week, and it was a really big deal. We fixed it. Some of the students already had it as a habit, and they're going to have to work really hard to change it. Hopefully they will. I tried to stress it as much as possible. Okay, number 2 on the list is that you have to pay attention to your students' reads. Young students, like 4th, 5th, 6th graders, they are not going to change their reed unless you tell them to. And if you were to look down the line of your saxophone players, you would see these mangled, chipped, ripped up reeds. Probably half of them are going to have reeds where if you look at it, you just go, oh. But so many teachers have so many other things to worry about that they don't check their students' reads. So what I want you to do is at least once a week, like let's say that you're in a public school directing an elementary or middle school band, I want you once a week to have them show you their reeds. And if they're chipped or growing mold or, black, you have to tell them to change the reed and make them do it right there. Okay, that's going to be a really, really important thing because again, if the equipment is not functioning for them, and I think we can all agree that the reed is maybe the most important piece of equipment when it comes to playing a woodwind instrument, they're going to develop awful habits to try to overcome their reed being broken. And some of them, honestly, it's very innocent. They just don't think. They just don't think that they have to change the reed. Also, another thing to stress with them is that even if you haven't chipped your reed, you want to replace that reed at least once a month, right? Because it does get disgusting and it also gets to be as thin as a piece of paper, and that can also really start them down the path of some bad habits where when the reed is super thin and it's really old, some of those students will keep the reed on for 3, 4, 6 months. It's amazing what you see when you deal with these young kids that are playing saxophone. It is kind of the same thing as being too far in on the mouthpiece. When the reed is that thin, they have no control over the instrument whatsoever because the reed is not giving them any resistance. Their pitch is going to be wild all over the place. These crazy flat or sharp pitches that are coming out of their instrument, and you don't know why. It could be their reed. So ask them, how long have you been using that reed? Some of them will say, oh, I don't even remember. I've been using this reed since I started playing the saxophone. Okay, take the reed off, put a new one on. Let's continue. So that would be the second thing that I would worry about. Now, the third thing is also an equipment issue. There's a trend in beginner instruments. And it's the same trend that's happening with a lot of things, not just instruments. The instruments are getting cheaper and cheaper. Like you can find a saxophone for like $90 on Amazon, and a lot of parents will buy that. And rightfully so, if it's between not being able to afford your student playing an instrument or being able to get them started, I'm all for it. But the problem is these instruments are getting more and more poorly built as the years go by. When I started playing saxophone, there was really only one student saxophone that everybody got, and that was a Yamaha YAS-23, a great saxophone. Nowadays, there's like 300 different companies. They're all terrible. They fall apart all over the place. But there's one piece of equipment that comes with these horns that I'm particularly concerned about, and that is the mouthpiece. So when I got my Yamaha YAS-23, it came with a Yamaha 4C mouthpiece. A great, great beginner's mouthpiece. I can't think of a better mouthpiece to start a student on than that Yamaha 4C. But some of these mouthpieces that come with these $90 to $200 horns are the worst mouthpieces ever made. And here's the thing about saxophone. The closer the equipment is to your face, the more important it is. So the reed and the mouthpiece are the two most important pieces of equipment that you can possibly have to get a good sound, especially when you're starting out. So some of these mouthpieces that I see my students playing, we just throw them away. We literally throw them away, and I have them go on Amazon or wherever and order a Yamaha 4C mouthpiece. These mouthpieces are like $30 or $35. So something that most parents can afford. That is an extremely important thing, because some of these mouthpieces, like the table is completely off, the reed doesn't seal, sometimes they're even chipped straight out of the box. Your student will never achieve a good sound with one of those mouthpieces that I'm talking about right now. It's impossible. So if their equipment is working against them, especially the mouthpiece, they're going to quit. Honestly, they're going to say this instrument is impossible. And to be honest with you, if I had one of those mouthpieces, it would be impossible for me to play the saxophone as well. So we can't expect these students to do a good job with this subpar equipment. So if a student opens a case and it's a saxophone that you've never seen before, and it's clearly very, very cheap, it has a no-name brand on it that you're pretty sure that they got off of Amazon for $140, you need to take that mouthpiece and tell them, hey, the first thing you need to do is get a new mouthpiece. Please get a Yamaha 4C. And if your school has a budget to buy those, you can get 10 of them for like $350, probably even less with a volume discount. So get some mouthpieces for your students. So those are the three things that I think are going to drastically improve the results of your beginner to 1-2 year students. It's going to actually make them enjoy playing the instrument. It's going to make your life a lot easier. You're going to go home with a lot less of a headache, save some money on Advil, and I think just generally make your program better, make your students better, make it easier for them. So hopefully this has been helpful for you. Hopefully this will make your life a little bit easier. Leave me some comments in the comment section and let me know what you think. Have you seen some of these problems? Are these things that you've heard before? What are some of the other difficulties that you have with your beginning saxophone and woodwind students? And I'd be happy to make another video talking about any of these topics. I want to see better student saxophone players out there. And I think that you can develop their love of music much more, keep them in the program all the way through high school, and generally just have better results if you start to think about these things. And I know it's such a tough thing if you're a brass player to sometimes diagnose your woodwind player's problems. So that's basically why I made this video. Alright, if you like this stuff, please like the video, give me a thumbs up. If you hated it, give me a thumbs down. Subscribe and turn on notifications so that you can get more of this content. I do want to do more of these videos where we talk about, tips for music teachers, tips for people trying to deal with, large ensembles, and things that can just make your life easier as a music educator. Nothing makes me happier than trying to make music educators' lives easier. Alright, so let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to subscribe, turn on notifications, and we'll see you on the next video. Have a great one, everybody.